Ishiguro's early novels had dealt with memory, self-delusion and regret across one person's lifespan. But as the century drew to a close, he began to think about these ideas on a different scale.
I received an invitation from a German poet called Christoph Heubner, who at that point was the chair of the National Auschwitz Committee. I went with some dread, and I wouldn't say that the 4 or 5 days I was there were comfortable days. It did etch itself in my mind quite deeply. A nation has the ability to actually recover from mistakes and trauma, even if it has been the perpetrator of evil. It has time to regenerate and learn from mistakes, if it has the will to do so. Because if you try and continue without really facing big parts of your history, then are you building something very fragile and breakable on bad foundations? And thereafter, I was looking for some vehicle, like a story in which I could express these questions. When is it best for a society just to forget some awful trauma and rebuild and move on? And when is it important to keep remembering?
In the fantasy world of the buried giant, an enchanted mist has fallen across the land that causes its inhabitants to forget their past. This blanket amnesia travels on the breath of a dragon, Querig. At the heart of the story is an elderly couple, Axel and Beatrice, who have lost all memory of the life they've shared.
She was sitting close beside him now, though her eyes were still on the distance and the line of tiny figures. "What is it you asked, Axel?" "It's simply this, Princess. Should Querig really die and the mist begin to clear? Should memories return, and among them of times I disappointed you? Or yet of dark deeds I may once have done to make you look at me and see no longer the man you do now? Promise me this at least. Promise, Princess, you'll not forget what you feel in your heart for me at this moment. For what good's a memory's returning from the mist if it's only to push away another? Will you promise me, Princess? Promise to keep what you feel for me this moment always in your heart, no matter what you see once the mist's gone." It's rather sweet-ish that she says, "I'll promise it, and no hardship to do so." I mean, that is love, isn't it? I mean, she may be wrong, of course.
They loved each other, but there were dark things in their relationship. This dilemma, if you like, takes place against this larger backdrop of a nation trying to decide whether it's better to remember the terrible things that tore it apart in the past.
We must hope that God yet finds a way to preserve the bonds between our peoples. Yet custom and suspicion have always divided us. Who knows what will come when quick-tongued men make ancient grievances rhyme with fresh desire for land and conquest. "How right to fear it, sir," Whiston said. "The giant, once well buried, now stirs. When soon he rises, as surely he will, the friendly bonds between us will prove as knots young girls make with the stems of small flowers. Men will burn their neighbors' houses by night, hang children from trees at dawn. The rivers will stink with corpses bloated from their days of voyaging. And even as they move on, our armies will grow larger, swollen with anger and thirst for vengeance."
Because he uses a fairy tale-like setting, people were able to project all sorts of moments in history onto that book. Was it a story about Bosnia? Was it a story about Japan during the war? Many people had many different interpretations. But because there were so many different interpretations, it reminds you that moments of great crisis, of great war, of great movement are not singular moments. They're ones that repeat throughout history, and they repeat for the same reason. The fact that it was an allegory, curiously, made it seem more urgent and more contemporary and somehow more wedded to history than if it had been set in a certain country during a certain time.
The themes of the buried giant have found new resonance in Britain today as we grapple with the legacy of our nation's past.